Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I'm a big fan of KISS looms, and I am cooperating with Kelly at KISS to present to you a whole series of looming techniques especially for KISS. We're going to do this on all sorts of KISS looms so you get to see every basic technique on your own loom. Welcome and enjoy. Let's compare these two looms for a minute. This is the regular gauge KISS, and I'm going to be twisting it around so that you can see through the pegs. These U-shaped formations are the pegs. The singles are the pins. So it's easy to see how you would wrap this, and there are other videos on it. Now, on the smaller gauge loom, we have the same kind of pegs, but they're turned sideways. Let me try to let you see down the holes. I think you can now. There is the same kind of peg, but there's the groove. There's the opening of the U. So this requires that we handle them just a little differently when knitting. Let's look first at the knit stitch. For this particular sweater, I am knitting the first stitch. Sometimes we slip it, meaning we don't wrap it, we don't knit it. This time I'm knitting it. So I'm going to wrap it. Now we can go one stitch at a time, and I could stick my tool in, catching the point in the groove between the two legs of the peg, and lift the stitch over, just like that. Let's do it again. Wrap, knit over. And it's a very easy motion. In some ways, it's easier than the pegs facing front. You can see the opening better facing front, but it's actually easier to access on this loom, in my opinion. Now, KISS looms have a very fast way of knitting called the continuous U-stitch. I'm doing the same wrap in front of a peg, behind a pin, in front of a peg, behind a pin, but I can do an entire row like that and then knit it all off. My habit is to knit one side or wrap one side, then anchor the final stitch on that side simply by knitting it over, and then go back and do the remainder of them. Of course, we want to make the most even stitching possible. Here are a few things that help you achieve that. First, wrap with the most consistent tension in your hand that you can manage. This makes the same amount of yarn go into every stitch, and that makes for even stitching. Also, hook over with as close to an identical motion as you can manage every time, not pulling one stitch hard up and over and another one barely flipping it over. That would make it uneven. Try to keep it consistent. Don't pull down the knitting as you work. If at the end of a row you need to gently tug it down evenly across, you can do that, but not until it's knitted. I find that that is my biggest source of unevenness, is to give in to the temptation to tug it down as I go. If you find that anchoring a stitch at one end, as I do, creates unevenness with more or less yarn allowed in those end stitches because of it, then don't do it that way. Do it stitch by stitch or a few at a time. Experiment and find what works for you, because each of us has an individual style. But fundamentally, even stitches are because they were formed in the same way with the same amount of yarn. And although I'm going a little bit slowly because of working behind the camera and to allow you to see, I think you can envision how fast this can become. Always make sure you've separated the two loops and catch only the bottom one, that it goes all the way over the peg and doesn't split on top, but does not get caught on the pin. If you did this, it would tangle matters up later on. So only over the peg. And that is all there is to the continuous U-stitch.